Hi, my name is Emily, and today we're going to be talking about Apis mellifera using visual cues to detect and remember spatial position of quality flowers. So first, we'll talk about our model organism. They are a eusocial type insect, meaning they live in colonies with a distinct reproductive caste. So they have a reproductive queen and a non-reproductive workers. Um, they also have distinct age casts differentiated by the age polyethism, and this is all regulated by hormones, pheromones, and nutritional aspects of their diet. They have an African origin, which scientists can map out their genome and see how it reflects adaptation to living in the Americas. This includes adaptation to how they live socially, and more importantly, pollination and environmental differences. Um, So, looking into a little bit about their vision, how honeybees see is they learn a set of familiar cues from familiar places. So, this includes edge length, orientation of bars, contrast and area of black or color, symmetry, and so on. Radial symmetry becomes very important, and we'll talk about that in a minute. They also use something called retinotopic imaging or eidetic memory, which is what we would be familiar with, meaning they can memorize or remember certain aspects of an area that they've been to before. Bees don't see an object as a whole, so they have to use their cues to create an idea of where they are, and they can become very disoriented if an object is moved. Research question: how do honeybees recognize and respond to flower patterns while foraging? We'll get straight into our first bit of data here. Um, so this is an image by Aidan Horridge. Bees were trained to recognize um, a single black bar and against a black background, and then tested the same bar rotated at different angles. So you can see part D here is our blank bar, and then A and B are different rotations of the bar. Performance declined as rotation increased, and their accuracy looked best when the rotated bar overlapped most with the original bar in D. The data closely matched a specific model by a previous scientist, where recognition depended on both the overlap and non-overlap between the test and training bar. And this data supports the idea of that eidetic memory or retinotopic imaging I was talking about. This helps to explain why bees struggled to recognize the same shape if it moved or changed in size, where their visual memory no longer matched. Later findings by later scientists showed adding sharp angles reduced orientation cues, which makes sense because flowers in the wild don't have the same sharp angles used in a lab setting. On to the next bit of data here. In these experiments, bees consistently preferred circular shapes over square ones. One part of this study showed that after being trained with patterns made from a specific circular design versus plain circles, the bees preferred the design patterns over the plain ones, even when they hadn't seen those exact designs before. So you can see here there's different variations of the bullseye pattern and a couple different variations of the dartboard type pattern. Um, so this suggests they were recognizing general shape and pattern, not just remembering exact images. Another test in this study confirmed this by showing bees different combinations of shapes that they had already seen, and they still had preferred patterns with radial symmetry, compared to different patterns like this checkboard one that had no radial symmetry. Um, the results help to show bees can recognize the flower-like patterns using symmetry over um, depending on their eidetic memory that we know that they have from our previous set of data points. This last set of data, researchers designed an artificial flower patch with some 2D shapes and some 3D shapes, and the flowers each had a reward. They were testing how bees reacted to flowers with different qualities of nectar and depending on their shape. They recorded whether or not the bees drank the nectar or just tasted it, and then the researchers tracked how bees responded to different shapes and rewards. When all the flowers gave equal rewards, there was no preference shown by the bees, and most bees picked at random. However, when one flower shape offered more calories, the bees would follow in suit. They started to favor the higher reward flower. Um, However, so that's this top image here, this bottom image here, table four, um, kind of shows a difference in color differences and shape differences. So, in experiments where color differences were the main focus, only 10% of bees visits went to lower reward flowers, so that error rate was low. But in tests with different shapes, the error rate jumped to almost 30%, and telling us that bees struggle with shapes more so than other cues like color. Um, so while flower shape alone isn't the most reliable aspect of a bee, it plays a role in the combination of cues. Um, and it suggests that the form cues are harder to learn or discriminate against. Conclusion, visual recognition is really important for foraging. Bees rely on this renotopic processing of different cues like symmetry. Instead of seeing objects as whole entities, they gathered this combination of cues, which helps them navigate familiar spaces. Um, Different behavioral studies can show flexible learning and memorization that bring them the most reward, uh, but they do have some cognitive limits there. And overall, it helps to show how adaptations in the bees work to help them support an ecosystem. And lastly, significance of the findings described in the previous slides is that we can better understand how bees interact with their environment and determine how they make decisions while foraging. It may help them to do better pollination, and research supports maintaining natural habitats in areas where bees might be common for more successful foraging and better pollination. And then here are my references. Thank you.